My name is Marcus Webb, and 37 days ago, I listened to a voicemail that made me laugh so hard I had to pull over on the Pacific Coast Highway. The man who destroyed my marriage was crying into my phone, begging me to take my wife back. But before I tell you what he said and why it changed everything, you need to understand how a software engineer with a six-figure salary ends up sleeping in his childhood bedroom at 42, and why that humiliation became the greatest gift I never asked for. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I spent 20 years writing code that made other people rich. Started as a junior developer at a startup in San Jose, learned to speak in algorithms and logic trees, debugged systems until my eyes burned. There's a particular satisfaction in it that non-technical people never quite grasp. You find the broken piece, you fix it, the system runs clean. No politics, no gray areas. Either the function executes or it throws an error. I love that clarity. I believed if you wrote good enough code, built reliable enough systems, people would recognize your worth. I didn't understand how some people prefer broken things they can control over fixed things they can't. That's how I approached everything. My career, my friendships, my marriage. Find the problem, apply the solution, move forward. I worked at 3 different companies, each one bigger than the last, climbing from cubicle to corner office by simply being the guy who delivered. No drama, no shortcuts, just clean work that shipped on time. My reputation was built on one principle that I never compromised. If Marcus Webb put his name on it, it worked. Colleagues respected that. Managers promoted that. I thought that was enough. Then I met Sarah at a tech conference in Austin. She was presenting on user experience design, and I was in the back row trying to stay awake after a red-eye flight. But when she started talking about empathy and interface design, about understanding what users feel before they click, something shifted. Most designers I knew talked about aesthetics. She talked about connection. After her session, I caught her at the coffee station and fumbled through a compliment about her framework. She smiled and asked if I actually understood it or was just being polite. I admitted I understood about 60%. She laughed and said that was better honesty than most engineers offered. We got coffee that turned into lunch that turned into walking around Austin until the sun dropped and the bats came out from under the bridge. She told me about growing up in Seattle, about her parents' messy divorce, about wanting to create digital spaces that felt safe when real spaces hadn't been. I told her about my mother's quiet strength, about learning to code in a garage with a used computer my uncle gave me, about believing systems could be better than people if you built them right. She said that was the saddest and most honest thing she'd heard all week. We exchanged numbers. I flew home thinking about her eyes when she listened, the way she leaned in like my words mattered. Long distance lasted 4 months. Video calls at midnight, messages that started with good morning and ended with sleep well, flights every other weekend that destroyed my budget and rebuilt my heart. She moved to San Francisco for a design position at a startup I'd consulted for, and suddenly we were in the same city, same coffee shops, same Sunday farmers market buying produce we'd forget to cook. My studio apartment became our studio apartment. Her plants filled the windowsill. My books made room for her sketch pads. We argued about thermostat settings and whether oat milk was a crime against nature. It felt real in a way code never could. Messy, unpredictable, human. I proposed on a Tuesday night with no plan and no ring. We were eating Thai takeout on the couch, and she was laughing at some story about a disaster sprint at work, and I just said it. Marry me. She stopped mid-sentence, chopsticks frozen, and asked if I was serious. I told her I'd never been more serious about anything that wasn't written in Python. She said yes with tears in her eyes and curry on her chin. We got rings the next week from a jeweler in the Mission who gave us a discount because we couldn't stop smiling. The wedding was small, immediate family, a judge in Oakland, and a reception at our favorite taco place. My mother cried happy tears. Sarah's father didn't show, and she pretended it didn't hurt. I held her hand through the whole ceremony and promised her I'd be the steady thing her childhood never had. But the first shadow appeared before the honeymoon ended. We'd gone to Maui, saved for a year to afford it, and on the third day, her phone buzzed constantly. "Work emergency," she said. "New product launch." I understood. I'd lived through those fires. But when I offered to help, she angled the screen away and said it was design stuff, not my area. That small gesture, that tiny rotation of her wrist, planted something I didn't want to name yet. I told myself it was nothing. Privacy isn't suspicion. Everyone needs space. But men my age know that feeling when a door closes that used to stay open. We settled into marriage the way people do, negotiating space and schedules and whose family we'd visit for holidays. I took a position at a mid-sized firm in Palo Alto, good pay, reasonable hours, a team I could actually lead. Sarah freelanced, taking contracts that let her work from home, filling our apartment with mood boards and color swatches. From the outside, we looked like the kind of couple that tech workers aspire to be. Matching mugs, shared calendar, inside jokes about merge conflicts and pixel perfection. My mother would visit and comment on how happy we seemed. I believed her because I wanted to. But inside, something was shifting like tectonic plates you don't feel until the ground cracks. Sarah started working later, headphones on, door closed to our spare room she'd turned into an office. I'd knock to ask about dinner, and she'd wave me off, mouthing 5 minutes that turned into 50. I tried to be understanding. Deadlines are deadlines. But the distance grew in increments too small to confront and too large to ignore. We'd sit on opposite ends of the couch, scrolling our phones, and I'd realize we hadn't actually talked in days. Not about anything real. Just logistics. Who's buying groceries? Did you pay the electric bill? Your mother called. I started noticing the small changes like bugs in code you can't quite isolate. New clothes I didn't recognize. A different perfume. Laughter at her phone that stopped when I entered the room. She joined a gym and went religiously at 6 a.m, coming back flushed and energized, kissing my forehead before jumping in the shower. I told myself it was good she was taking care of herself. But the man I used to be, the one who debugged systems for a living, could feel the logic breaking down. Functions that should return one value were returning another. Then came the weekend. She said she was going to a design conference in Portland. 3 days, good for networking, good for her portfolio. I kissed her goodbye at the door, told her to have fun, and watched her Uber pull away with a suitcase that seemed too big for 3 days. I spent that weekend cleaning the apartment like a man trying to scrub away a feeling he can't name. Reorganized my desk. Fixed the leaky faucet I'd been ignoring. Cooked meals I ate alone. She texted sporadically. "Sessions are great. Miss you." I replied with hearts and thumbs up, playing the supportive husband while my gut twisted. She came back different. Not dramatically. Just a degree off-center. More distant in her affection, more guarded with her phone, more exhausted by questions that used to spark conversation. I asked about the conference. She gave vague answers about workshops and networking. No stories, no excitement, none of the usual energy she brought back from professional events. I didn't push. Men like me learn to live with unanswered questions when the alternative is confirming what we fear. The unraveling came slowly, then all at once. I noticed her laptop open to messages she minimized when I walked by. I saw her smile at texts and then delete them. I heard her on the phone in the backyard, voice low and soft, the way she used to talk to me. I became a detective in my own home, watching for clues I didn't want to find, building a case I hoped would fall apart. Every piece of evidence I gathered felt like swallowing glass. Part of me wanted to confront her. Part of me wanted to pretend I saw nothing. The third part, the part that writes code and solves problems, wanted data. I needed to know if the system was broken or if I was just paranoid. I found the data on a Tuesday night. She'd left her laptop open, music playing, gone to take a call in the bedroom. Her messages were right there, conversation with someone named Ethan filled with words that didn't belong to a wife. The way he called her beautiful. The way she called him baby. Plans to meet. Promises to be careful. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A photo of them together that punched the air from my lungs. I stood in the glow of that screen reading my marriage's obituary in real time, each message a line of code executing a program I never wrote. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I sat down at the kitchen table and waited. When she came back, she saw my face and knew immediately. The color drained from her like someone pulled a plug. She started with denials that crumbled into excuses that dissolved into apologies. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. She loved me. I asked how long. She hesitated. 6 months, she whispered. I nodded like she'd confirmed a hypothesis. That made sense. The timeline fit. Portland wasn't a conference. The gym wasn't about fitness. Every late night, every closed door, every angled phone screen suddenly had context. I asked who he was. She said his name like it hurt her to give it to me. Ethan Bradshaw. A creative director at an agency she'd worked with. Older, established, charming in ways I apparently wasn't. I asked if she loved him. She cried and said she didn't know, which I understood meant yes, but she wasn't ready to say it. I asked the question I was most afraid of. Do you want to stay married? She looked at me with tears streaming and said she didn't know that either. That answer told me everything. I moved out the next day. Not out of anger but out of self-preservation. My mother would have called it dignity. My therapist would later call it boundaries. I called it survival. I packed a bag with clothes and my laptop, left the furniture and the photos and the life we'd built, and drove to my mother's house in Fremont. She opened the door, saw my face, and didn't ask questions. She just held me while I shook with a grief that didn't know how to be loud. I was 42 years old, crying in my mother's arms like a boy who'd lost something he couldn't get back. I sat up in my childhood bedroom, same wallpaper from high school, same desk where I'd learned to code, same window that looked out at the neighbor's oak tree. Everything was smaller than I remembered. The bed, the room, my life. I stared at posters of bands that didn't exist anymore and wondered how a man gets here. From corner office and happy marriage to twin bed and action figures in the closet. My mother brought me tea and toast, same as when I was sick as a kid, and said a truth only mothers can. You're not broken, Marcus. You're just learning what you're made of. But I felt broken. Broken in a way no amount of debugging could fix. I'd approach problems logically my entire life. Input, process, output. But this didn't compute. I'd been a good husband. Present, faithful, supportive. I'd worked hard, paid bills, showed up. I'd given her space when she needed it and closeness when she asked. I'd done everything the manual said to do. And still, I'd lost. That failure sat on my chest at night, heavy and hot, asking questions I couldn't answer. What did he have that I didn't? What did I miss? Where did I fail? The divorce papers arrived certified mail, her lawyer's letterhead cold and formal. Sarah wanted the apartment, the furniture, half my retirement. She wanted it done quickly, quietly, like our marriage was a failed project we needed to deprecate. I signed where I was told to sign. My lawyer said I was being too generous. I told him I was being done. I didn't have the energy to fight over things that would only remind me of what I'd lost. She could have the couch where we'd watched movies. The bed where we'd made promises. The kitchen where I'd proposed. I'd take my clothes and my coat and figure out how to be a person again. The settlement meeting happened in a conference room with air conditioning that ran too cold. Sarah sat across from me in a blue dress I bought her for her birthday, and I wondered if that choice was intentional or cruel. Our lawyers did most of the talking, dividing years into line items and signatures. She looked at me once, really looked, and I saw something that might have been regret or might have been relief. I couldn't tell anymore. We'd lost the language we used to share. When it was over, we stood in the parking lot, and she said she was sorry. I told her I believed her. Then I got in my car and drove away from the last 5 years of my life. I became a ghost in my mother's house. I'd wake at dawn, code from the desk in my room, break only for food and forced conversation. My mother tried to pull me back into the world with gentle questions and home-cooked meals. I appreciated it and resented it in equal measure. I didn't want comfort. I wanted to disappear into work where problems had solutions and effort yielded results. I took on freelance contracts, built apps I didn't care about, wrote elegant code that no one but me would ever see. The work was good. I was good at it. But it felt like shouting into a void. Friends called. I didn't answer. My mother suggested therapy. I went once, sat in a chair across from a woman with kind eyes, and described my life like a system failure analysis. She asked what I was feeling. I told her I was debugging. She said that wasn't an emotion. I said it was the only one I had access to. She gave me homework. Write down 3 things you're grateful for every day. I stopped going. But the homework stuck. Every night, I'd stare at a blank page and try to find gratitude in the wreckage. I'm grateful my mother lets me stay here. I'm grateful I have skills people pay for. I'm grateful I didn't have kids with Sarah. That last one felt like a victory and a tragedy. We'd talked about children. She'd wanted to wait until her career stabilized. Now I understood she was waiting for something else. Someone else. The thought of raising a child with her, of being tied to her and him forever, made my stomach turn. So yes, I was grateful. But gratitude tasted like ash. Weeks turned into months. I started running at night, long loops through neighborhoods I didn't know, punishing my body because my mind wouldn't shut up. I'd come home gasping and sweating, collapse on the twin bed, and finally sleep without dreams. My mother worried. My doctor said I was losing weight too fast. I told them I was fine. I was lying. But lying felt easier than admitting I didn't know how to be a person whose wife chose someone else. Then came the update I didn't ask for. A mutual friend, trying to be helpful, sent me a screenshot. Sarah and Ethan, official on social media, posing at some rooftop bar with sunset and cocktails. They looked happy. Glowing. The kind of happy that photographs well. Comments below from people I knew, congratulating them, calling them cute, saying they were relationship goals. I stared at that photo until the screen blurred, until my mother knocked on my door asking if I was okay. I lied again. I'm fine, Mom. Just working. But I wasn't fine. I was unraveling in a way I couldn't code my way out of. Every logical framework I'd built my life on had failed. Work hard. Be honest. Keep promises. None of it mattered. Sarah had still left. Ethan had still won. And I was still sleeping in a bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, wondering when the universe would feel less like a joke I didn't get. That's when my mother sat me down, hands folded like she was about to deliver a sermon. Marcus, she said, you can't let this woman define the rest of your life. I told her I wasn't. She called me on that lie immediately. You're not living. You're hiding. There's a difference. She was right, but I didn't have an answer. I didn't know how to start over. I didn't know how to trust. I didn't know how to be the man I was before Sarah and also not that man because he'd been naive enough to miss every sign. My mother handed me a piece of paper with a name and number. Her pastor's counselor. A man who helps people rebuild, she said. Just talk to him once. For me. I took the paper to make her happy, folded it into my wallet where I wouldn't have to look at it. But late at night, when the house was quiet and the loneliness was loud, I'd pull it out and stare at those digits like they were a password I didn't have the courage to enter. Then everything changed with 3 knocks on my mother's front door and a voicemail that made me realize the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The knock came on a Saturday afternoon while my mother was at the grocery store. 3 deliberate raps that sounded like they expected an answer. I was in the middle of a code review, headphones on, coffee going cold beside my laptop. I ignored it. Delivery drivers leave packages. Salespeople give up. But the knock came again, patient and persistent, the kind that says I know you're in there. I opened the door to find a man in his late 50s, expensive suit that had seen better days, leather bag worn at the handles. He had the look of someone who'd been successful once and was holding on to the memory. His eyes were tired but sharp, taking my measure the way you assess a system before you try to fix it. Marcus Webb, he said, not a question. I nodded, hand still on the door, ready to close it if this was a sales pitch or a lawsuit. He extended a business card. Dennis Cartwright, attorney at law. My stomach dropped. More divorce papers, I thought. More things Sarah wanted that I didn't have the energy to fight over. But he surprised me. I'm not here about your divorce, he said, reading my face accurately. I'm here about Ethan Bradshaw. The name landed like a punch I should have seen coming. What about him? I asked, voice flat. Mr. Cartwright shifted his bag to the other hand. May I come in? This isn't a conversation for a doorstep. Every instinct told me to slam the door. Nothing good comes from lawyers bearing news about the man who destroyed your marriage. But curiosity is stronger than self-preservation sometimes, and I stepped aside. We sat at my mother's kitchen table, the same one where I'd eaten breakfast as a kid, where I'd studied for exams, where I'd broken down crying 6 weeks ago. He set his bag on the floor, folded his hands on the table, and looked at me with something between pity and respect. Mr. Webb, I'll be direct. Ethan Bradshaw is my client, or was until recently. He's in considerable trouble, and your name has come up in ways you need to be aware of. I asked what kind of trouble. Financial, he said. Legal. Personal. The kind that tends to cascade. He explained it slowly, like he was teaching a concept to someone who needed to understand every step. Ethan ran a creative agency that looked successful on paper but was hemorrhaging money underneath. Flashy office, expensive lunches, trips to conferences that were more vacation than business. He'd been funding his lifestyle with client advances and investor money that was supposed to go into projects. Classic Ponzi structure, Mr. Cartwright said. Rob Peter to impress Paul. It worked until it didn't. Apparently, it stopped working about 3 weeks ago when a major client demanded their money back and Ethan couldn't produce it. Auditors got involved. Lawyers got involved. The house of cards folded in slow motion. Ethan lost his business, his reputation, and according to Mr. Cartwright, his relationship with Sarah. She left him when the money dried up, he said, watching my reaction. Moved out of the penthouse he was renting, blocked his number, told mutual friends she'd been deceived. I absorbed this information like data, sorting it into categories I could process. So he's broken alone, I said. Why are you telling me this? Mr. Cartwright reached into his bag and pulled out a folder. Because he's been calling your wife. Ex-wife, I corrected automatically. He nodded. Ex-wife. Dozens of calls. Voicemails. Text messages. Begging her to come back, to give him another chance, to remember what they had. She hasn't responded to any of them. He paused, and I could see him choosing his next words carefully. 3 days ago, he started calling you. I stared at him. I haven't gotten any calls from Ethan. I don't even have his number. You wouldn't, Mr. Cartwright said. He's been calling your old landline, the apartment you shared with Sarah. The number forwards to voicemail now that the service is disconnected. He's left you 7 messages. I felt something cold slide down my spine. Why would he call me? What could he possibly have to say? Mr. Cartwright opened the folder and slid a single sheet across the table. It was a transcript, time-stamped and dated, professional and devastating. This is the most recent one, he said. I thought you should know what he's saying. I picked up the paper with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. I read it once quickly, then again slowly, and then a third time because my brain couldn't quite believe what my eyes were processing. The voicemail was a masterpiece of desperation. Ethan's voice, transcribed into cold text, begging me to take Sarah back. saying she was miserable without me. That she'd made a terrible mistake. That I was the better man, the stable one, the one who actually loved her. He said he couldn't give her what she needed, couldn't be what I'd been. He called me solid and reliable like they were compliments he was just now discovering the value of. He said if I still loved her, if I still wanted her, I should call her because she was too proud to reach out first, but she was falling apart. I set the paper down and laughed. Not a happy laugh. The kind that comes when the absurdity is so complete your body doesn't know what else to do. He's asking me to take her back, I said. The man she left me for is begging me to fix his mess. Mr. Cartwright nodded. That's the core of it, yes. I asked why he cared. Why a lawyer would drive out here to tell me about my ex-wife's ex-boyfriend's breakdown. He leaned back in his chair. Because Ethan named you in several conversations as someone who might help Sarah. He seems to believe you still care about her. He also mentioned you multiple times in therapy sessions that became part of his legal record. Your name is attached to his collapse in ways that could be problematic. I felt anger rising, clean and sharp. Problematic how? I didn't do anything. I know, Mr. Cartwright said. That's why I'm here. To make sure you're protected if this gets messy. Ethan is desperate, irrational, and looking for someone to blame besides himself. Right now, he's fixated on the idea that you could solve his problems by taking Sarah back. If you don't, there's a chance he escalates. I asked what escalation looked like. Mr. Cartwright's face went grim. Harassment. False accusations. Showing up at your home or workplace. I've seen desperate men do desperate things when they lose everything. He handed me another card, this one for a security consultant. If he contacts you directly, call this person immediately. Document everything. Don't engage. Don't respond. Just protect yourself. I took the card, added it to the growing collection of cards that represented the explosion of my life. And the voicemails, I asked. Can I hear them? Mr. Cartwright shook his head. They're evidence in Ethan's case. But I can tell you they get progressively more unhinged. The first few are apologetic. The recent ones are angry. He blames you for being too good. For setting a standard he couldn't meet. For existing. After Mr. Cartwright left, I sat at that kitchen table for an hour, staring at the transcript. I read it so many times I memorized it. Ethan's words, his desperate plea for me to save him by taking back the woman he'd stolen. The logic was insane. The audacity was staggering. And underneath it all was a truth I didn't want to acknowledge. He was right that Sarah had made a mistake. Just not the one he thought. My mother came home with groceries and found me still sitting there, paper in hand, expression somewhere between disbelief and vindication. What happened? She asked, setting bags on the counter. I handed her the transcript. She read it slowly, lips moving slightly, and when she finished, she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Righteous fury mixed with maternal protection. This man, she said, voice shaking, has some nerve. I nodded. That he does. She started unpacking groceries with aggressive efficiency, slamming cans into the pantry. Are you going to call her? The question hung in the air like smoke. Was I? Did some part of me want to rescue Sarah from the consequences of her choices? Did I want to be the hero of a story where I'd been cast as the villain? I thought about it honestly, searching my feelings like I'd search code for a bug. And I found something surprising. I didn't want her back. The realization was clean and clear. I didn't want to rescue her. I didn't want to gloat. I didn't want anything from her except distance. I told my mother no. I'm not calling her. She nodded, satisfied, and handed me a can of soup to put away. Good, she said. That girl made her bed with expensive sheets and a man who couldn't afford them. Let her lie in it. I smiled despite myself. My mother's wisdom came wrapped in practicality that was hard to argue with. But I couldn't stop thinking about those voicemails, about Ethan's voice cracking as he begged me to save him from his own consequences. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my friend David, the one who'd sent me that screenshot of Sarah and Ethan looking happy. He answered on the third ring, surprise in his voice. "Marcus? Man, it's been forever." "I know," I said. "I need to ask you something." "Shoot," he said. I heard music in the background, the sounds of a life continuing normally. "What do you know about Ethan Bradshaw's business?" David went quiet for a moment. "Why are you asking?" "Just curious," I lied. "I heard some things." David sighed. "It's a mess, man. Total implosion. Guy was living like he was already successful before he actually was. Fake it till you make it, except he never made it. He just faked better than most. Clients are furious. Employees are scrambling. I heard Sarah bailed when his credit cards started declining. I absorbed this, filing it away. Do you know where she is now?" David hesitated. "I don't know if I should tell you this." "Tell me," I said. "I need to know." Another sigh. "She moved back in with her mom in Seattle. From what I heard, she's pretty broken up. Lost her apartment, lost Ethan, lost whatever fantasy she was living." I thanked him and hung up. Sarah was in Seattle, back where she started, back in the house she'd told me stories about, the one that never felt safe. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I spent the next few days in a strange state of limbo. Part of me wanted to hear those voicemails, to listen to Ethan's voice break as he begged. Part of me knew that would be poison disguised as vindication. I threw myself into work instead, taking on a complex project that required focus I didn't have but needed. I coded until my eyes burned, debugged until my brain felt like static, shipped features that clients praised. The work was good. I was good. And slowly, very slowly, I started to feel like myself again. My mother noticed the shift. "You seem lighter," she said one morning over coffee. I considered that. "Maybe I am." She smiled. "That lawyer visit, as scary as it was, gave you something." "What's that?" I asked. "Perspective," she said. "You're not the failure in this story, Marcus. You never were." I wanted to believe her. Some days I did. Other days the doubt crept back in, whispering that if I'd been enough, Sarah wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. But then I'd remember the transcript. I'd remember Ethan calling me solid and reliable like those were boring traits he hadn't appreciated until they were gone. I'd remember that Sarah left both of us in the end, and maybe the problem wasn't me. Maybe some people are just broken in ways you can't fix, chasing highs they can't sustain, burning bridges they can't rebuild. Maybe the best thing I ever did was be someone she couldn't destroy completely. 2 weeks after Mr. Cartwright's visit, I got a message from an unknown number. Just a text, no context. "I'm sorry for everything. I know that doesn't fix anything. I hope you're doing okay." No name, but I knew. Sarah had always ended apologies with hope for me, like she could transfer her guilt into my well-being. I stared at that message for a long time, thumb hovering over the reply button. I could say so many things. I could ask why. I could tell her about Ethan's voicemails. I could let her know I knew everything. Instead, I deleted the message and blocked the number. Some conversations don't deserve to happen. My therapist, the one I'd gone back to after Mr. Cartwright's visit, called that growth. "You're choosing yourself," she said. "That's not selfish. That's survival." I told her it felt more like self-preservation than growth. She smiled. Sometimes they're the same thing. We talked about boundaries, about the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, about how you can release anger without giving someone access to hurt you again. It made sense in her office. At home, at 3 in the morning, it was harder to hold on to. But I kept trying. I started saying yes to things I'd been avoiding. Dinner with friends. A coding meetup in the city. A weekend hiking trip David organized. I showed up to my life instead of hiding from it. People noticed. You seem different, David said halfway up a trail in Marin. Better different. I asked him what he meant. He shrugged. I don't know. More present. Like you're actually here instead of just going through motions. I thought about that. Maybe I was. Maybe losing everything had forced me to show up for what was left. The second message from Sarah came 3 weeks after the first. This one was longer, more desperate. I know I don't deserve to talk to you. I know I destroyed everything good we had. But I need you to know Ethan wasn't what I thought he was. He lied about everything. His success, his stability, his feelings. I was so stupid, Marcus. I threw away something real for something shiny and fake. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know I see it now. I see what I had. I see what I lost. I read it twice and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sympathy, no desire to respond. She wanted absolution I didn't have to give. She wanted me to tell her it was okay, that mistakes happen, that we could file this under lessons learned and move forward as friends. But it wasn't okay. Mistakes are spilling coffee or missing an exit. Choosing someone else, building a life with them, flaunting it publicly while I rebuilt myself from wreckage. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. And choices have consequences she was only now beginning to understand. I showed the message to my therapist. What do you want to do with this? She asked. Nothing, I said. Absolutely nothing. She nodded. That's an answer too. We talked about closure, about how it's not something someone gives you. It's something you create for yourself by deciding the story is over. Sarah could send 100 messages. She could show up at my door. She could beg and apologize and promise she'd changed. None of it would change what happened. None of it would rewind time to before she made her choice. The story of Marcus and Sarah was over. This was just the epilogue I didn't need to read. But Ethan wasn't finished. Mr. Cartwright called me on a Thursday evening, voice tense. He tried to contact you today. I froze. What do you mean tried? He showed up at your old apartment building. Asked the landlord for your forwarding address. Landlord didn't have one, told him to leave. Ethan got aggressive. Police were called. He's been issued a warning. My heart pounded. Does he know where my mother lives? Not as far as we can tell, Mr. Cartwright said. But I'd recommend staying alert. Varying your routine. The security consultant I referred you to can help. I thanked him and hung up, mind racing. My mother was out with friends, book club night she never missed. I sat in the dimming light of the kitchen and felt the walls of my childhood home close in. This was supposed to be safe space, refuge, the place you return to when the world breaks you. And now it might be compromised by a man I'd never met, whose only connection to me was destruction. I called the security consultant. She was professional, calm, efficient. We set up protocols. Cameras for the front and back of the house. New locks. A plan for if Ethan appeared. It felt surreal, like I was in a thriller movie instead of my actual life. When my mother came home, I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, face hardening with each detail. Then she walked to the hallway closet and pulled out my father's old baseball bat. Let him try, she said, gripping it like she meant it. I smiled despite the tension. Mom, we're not going to assault anyone. She set the bat by the front door. I'm not assaulting. I'm defending. There's a difference. I didn't argue. My mother had protected me my whole life. I wasn't going to tell her to stop now. The next week passed in hypervigilance. Every car that slowed near the house made my pulse spike. Every knock on the door required checking the camera first. I hated it. I hated that Ethan had invaded not just my past but my present, that his collapse was somehow my problem to manage. I worked from home, avoided patterns, told my clients I was dealing with a family situation. They were understanding. The code still shipped. The system still ran. But underneath it all was a current of anxiety I couldn't debug away. Then the voicemail I'd been both dreading and anticipating arrived. Not on my phone. On my mother's landline, the number I'd grown up with, the one that still got calls from my father even though he'd been gone 5 years. I was making coffee when I saw the light blinking on the ancient answering machine my mother refused to replace. Something told me to play it. Maybe curiosity. Maybe fate. Maybe just the universe's terrible sense of timing. I pressed play and heard Ethan's voice for the first time. It was nothing like I'd imagined. Not smooth or charming or confident. It was broken, slurred with alcohol or exhaustion or both. "Marcus," he started, breathing heavy into the phone. "I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I'm the last person who has any right to ask you for anything. But I'm begging you, man. I'm begging you. Please take her back. Please call Sarah and tell her you forgive her and you want to try again." He paused, and I heard something that might have been crying or laughing. "She won't talk to me. She won't answer my calls. She told her mom to tell me she never wants to see me again. And I get it. I do. I screwed everything up. The business, the money, us. I promised her a life I couldn't deliver. But you, Marcus, you're the real deal. You're the guy who shows up. You're the guy who keeps promises. She needs that. She needs you. And I know I'm the reason she doesn't have you anymore." His voice cracked completely. "I destroyed everything. My company is gone. My reputation is garbage. The woman I left my wife for, yeah, I was married too, she's gone. And Sarah, beautiful Sarah who I thought was my second chance, she's gone too. And it's all my fault. But you can fix it, Marcus. You can be the hero here. Just call her. Tell her you still love her. Take her back. Give her the stability I couldn't. Be the man I pretended to be." There was a long pause where all I could hear was his breathing. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "If you do this, maybe I can stop hating myself enough to sleep. Maybe knowing she's okay will make this bearable. Please, Marcus. I'm begging you as one man to another. Save her from the mess I made." The message ended with a beep that sounded like punctuation. I stood in that kitchen with cold coffee in my hand and my mother's answering machine blinking victoriously like it had delivered a prophecy. I played the message again. Then a third time. Each listen revealed new layers of desperation, manipulation, and audacity. Ethan wasn't asking me to save Sarah. He was asking me to save him from the consequences of his choices. He wanted me to fix what he'd broken so he could feel less guilty about breaking it. The anger I thought I'd processed came roaring back. This man had an affair with my wife. He'd helped her deceive me for months. He'd been part of photos that congratulated them on their happiness while I was sleeping in a twin bed. And now he had the nerve to call me, to track down my mother's number, to ask me to clean up his disaster so he could sleep at night. The entitlement was breathtaking. But underneath the anger was something else. Something that felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. Ethan's message wasn't about Sarah at all. It was about him. His guilt, his loss, his need for redemption he hadn't earned. And Sarah's message wasn't really an apology. It was a request for me to absolve her, to say the betrayal was okay now that it hadn't worked out. Neither of them wanted to face what they'd done. They wanted me to carry it for them. I saved the voicemail. Backed it up to 3 different places. Not because I wanted to listen again but because it was evidence. Evidence that I wasn't crazy. That the story I'd been telling myself about being inadequate, about not being enough, was a lie they'd both participated in creating. I was enough. I'd always been enough. They were the ones who weren't. And now they wanted me to pretend otherwise so they could feel better about their failures. My mother came home from the store and found me still standing by the answering machine. "You okay?" she asked, setting down bags. "I'm better than okay," I told her. "Play this." She listened to Ethan's voicemail with an expression that went from shock to disgust to something that looked like pride. When it ended, she turned to me. "What are you going to do?" I smiled, and it felt real for the first time in months. "Absolutely nothing," I said. "I'm going to let them both sit in exactly what they created." She nodded slowly. "That's my boy." We made dinner together, and I felt lighter than I had since the divorce. Not because I was happy about what had happened, but because I finally understood it wasn't my job to fix it. They'd made their choices. They'd faced their consequences. And I was free to make new choices that had nothing to do with either of them. That night, I slept through until morning for the first time in 6 months. No nightmares, no 3 a.m. anxiety, no replaying conversations in my head. Just deep, dreamless sleep that felt like healing. When I woke up, sun streaming through the window of my childhood bedroom, I knew something had shifted. The weight I'd been carrying, the one that told me I'd failed, had lifted. I hadn't failed. I'd survived. And survival, I was learning, was its own kind of success. The shift wasn't dramatic. There was no montage of me running upstairs or throwing away her pictures. Change came in small decisions that accumulated like interest. I started looking at apartments in San Jose, places with actual bedrooms and kitchens that belonged to adults. I updated my resume not because I needed a job but because I wanted to remember what I'd accomplished. I called old colleagues and went to lunch without feeling like I needed to explain my divorce. I just showed up as Marcus, the guy who writes clean code and keeps his word. My mother noticed everything, the way mothers do. "You're planning something," she said one Sunday morning while we were reading the paper at the kitchen table. "Not planning," I told her. "Just moving forward." She reached across and squeezed my hand. "About time." I smiled. "Thanks for letting me hide here while I figured that out." She waved me off. "This is your home too. But yes, it's probably time you had your own space again." We both laughed, and it felt good. Easy. Like we were ourselves again instead of mother and wounded son. I found a place within 2 weeks. Nothing fancy. A 1-bedroom in Mountain View, 2nd floor, view of a parking lot but also a slice of sky. The rent was reasonable. The lease was flexible. The landlord was a retired engineer who asked about my work instead of my credit score. When I told him I was recently divorced, he nodded once. "Been there. You'll be fine." That simple confidence from a stranger meant more than he knew. I signed the lease and felt something click back into place. Not the old life. Something new that fit better. Moving day was efficient. I didn't have much. My mother insisted I take the coffee maker she'd bought me when I first moved out at 22. "You'll need good coffee," she said. "It's half the battle." I took it along with some furniture she was ready to part with, dishes that had outlived their pattern, a lamp that had lit 3 decades of homework and late-night conversations. David showed up with his truck and didn't ask invasive questions. He just helped me haul boxes and made jokes about my book collection. "You know they have libraries, right?" "This is lighter than before," I told him. He understood what I meant. The apartment echoed at first, that hollow sound of spaces waiting to be filled. I set up my desk by the window, arranged my monitors, plugged in the equipment that had followed me through 3 jobs and 1 marriage. The code editor opened with a familiar glow. I was home in the only way that mattered. I could work here. Think here. Build here. The rest would follow. My first night alone, I ordered pizza and sat on the floor because my furniture hadn't arrived yet. I ate straight from the box, no plate, no pretense, and listened to the building settle around me. Footsteps above. Music through the wall. The hum of the refrigerator I'd need to get used to. It wasn't silent. It wasn't lonely. It was just life happening in the ordinary way life does when you're not running from it. I pulled out my phone and looked at Sarah's blocked messages. The app showed me there were 6 more I hadn't read. My thumb hovered over the unblock button. Some part of me wanted to know what she'd said, what evolution her apologies had taken. But I already knew. They'd be variations on the same theme. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I miss what we had. Words that wanted absolution without accountability. I put the phone down. Those messages could stay unread forever. They weren't for me anyway. They were for her. Work became my anchor again, but different this time. I took on projects I cared about instead of just projects that paid. A nonprofit needed a volunteer management system. I built it for cost. A friend's startup needed architecture advice. I consulted for equity instead of cash. I wasn't chasing the next promotion or the bigger salary. I was building things that mattered to people who appreciated craftsmanship. The satisfaction was quieter than success but deeper. My reputation rebuilt itself naturally. One good project led to referrals. Referrals led to opportunities. Within 3 months, I had more work than I could handle and the luxury of being selective. I hired a junior developer, a kid fresh out of boot camp with hunger in his eyes and gaps in his knowledge I could fill. Teaching him reminded me why I'd fallen in love with code in the first place. The logic, the creativity, the satisfaction of making something from nothing. Then one afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Marcus Webb, I said. There was a pause, breathing, then a voice I'd only heard once before on an answering machine. Marcus, it's Ethan. My entire body went rigid. I should have hung up immediately. Instead, I stayed silent, waiting. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, he continued, voice steadier than the voicemail but still carrying that edge of desperation. I needed to talk to you. I found my voice. How did you get this number? Does it matter? Yes, I said firmly. It matters. There was a sigh. I hired someone. A researcher. I needed to reach you. That answer made my blood run cold. You hired someone to find me? Do you understand how that sounds? I'm not trying to scare you, he said quickly. I just need 5 minutes. 5 minutes to say what I should have said a long time ago. I looked around my quiet apartment, at the life I'd been rebuilding brick by brick. You don't get 5 minutes, I said. You don't get any of my time. Wait, he said, panic creeping in. Please. Just let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I told him. You had an affair with my wife. You helped her lie to me. You flaunted your relationship while I was putting my life back together. And when it all fell apart for you, you had the audacity to call me and ask me to fix it. There's nothing you can say that I need to hear. His breathing got heavier. I know I screwed up, he said. I know I hurt you. But I'm trying to make amends. I'm in therapy. I'm working on myself. I thought maybe if I could apologize directly, if you could hear me say it, maybe it would help both of us. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Help both of us? This isn't about both of us, Ethan. This is about you trying to feel better about what you did. You want me to forgive you so you can move on with a clear conscience. But I don't owe you that. I don't owe you anything. There was a long silence. Finally, he spoke, voice small. You're right. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry for calling. I'm sorry for everything. I won't bother you again. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, adrenaline pumping through my system like I'd just run a marathon. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. But underneath the physical response was something solid. I'd set a boundary. I'd protected my peace. I'd refused to carry his guilt. That felt like power I didn't know I'd had. I blocked his number immediately, then called Mr. Cartwright to report the contact. He took notes and promised to handle it. You did the right thing, he said. Don't engage. Don't negotiate. Just document and move on. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety but from energy. I kept replaying the conversation, hearing my own voice stay firm, refuse to be manipulated, protect what I'd built. The Marcus who'd signed divorce papers in numb silence wouldn't have done that. He would have listened, maybe even offered comfort, because that's what nice guys do. But I wasn't trying to be nice anymore. I was trying to be whole. And whole people don't let their destroyers back in just because those destroyers are suffering consequences. I got up and made coffee at 2 in the morning, sat at my desk, and did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote. Not code. Words. Actual sentences about what I'd been through, what I'd learned, what I'd lost and found. It poured out of me like water from a broken pipe. Pages and pages of truth I'd been too busy surviving to articulate. When dawn came, I had a document that looked like therapy and felt like freedom. I saved it, backed it up, and titled it simply, The Aftermath. My therapist loved it when I brought it to our next session. This is significant work, she said, reading passages I'd marked. You're not just processing. You're integrating. I asked what that meant. She smiled. It means you're not stuck anymore. You're moving through the experience instead of around it. We talked about closure again, about how it's not a door that slams but a path you walk until the destination doesn't matter anymore. I told her I thought I was on that path. She said she could tell. A month after Ethan's call, I got an email from Sarah. Not a text this time. An actual email with a subject line that read simply, Please read this. I stared at it in my inbox for 2 days before opening it. When I finally did, it was long. Detailed. Raw in a way her texts hadn't been. She told me about meeting Ethan, about how he'd seemed exciting and successful, about how he'd made her feel seen in ways she'd convinced herself I didn't. She admitted she'd been looking for problems in our marriage to justify what she wanted to do anyway. She said therapy had helped her understand she'd been chasing validation instead of connection. The email went on. She talked about the collapse of Ethan's business, about watching him lie to clients and investors, about realizing he'd lied to her too. She described moving back to Seattle, back to her mother's house, back to the bedroom she'd grown up in. Full circle in the worst way, she wrote. She said she understood if I never wanted to speak to her again. That she wasn't asking for reconciliation or even friendship. She just wanted me to know she saw clearly now what she'd thrown away. That I'd been the real thing and she'd traded it for fool's gold. I read the email 3 times. Then I closed it and went for a run. Miles of pavement under my feet, cool air in my lungs, mind processing what she'd said. Part of me felt vindicated. She'd admitted what I'd known all along. I hadn't been the problem. Part of me felt sad for her, for anyone who makes decisions from brokenness and has to live with the fallout. But mostly, I felt nothing. Her realization didn't change my life. Her regret didn't undo the betrayal. Her clarity came too late to matter. I never responded to the email. Not out of cruelty but out of self-preservation. There was nothing to say that would help either of us. She needed to sit with her choices. I needed to keep building my life. Those two needs didn't intersect anymore. A week later, I archived the email. Not deleted. Just moved out of sight. Maybe someday I'd be curious enough to read it again. Maybe not. Either way was fine. My junior developer, Kevin, turned out to be talented once you taught him to think in systems instead of scripts. We worked well together, his enthusiasm balancing my experience, his questions forcing me to articulate things I'd taken for granted. One afternoon, he asked me about the divorce. Not prying, just curious. You seem pretty zen about it, he said. How'd you get there? I thought about the question. Time, I told him. Therapy. Good friends. Choosing myself even when it felt selfish. He nodded like he was filing that away for future reference. That's solid advice, he said. I started dating again, cautiously. Coffee dates that stayed coffee dates. Dinners that were pleasant but didn't spark. A woman named Lisa who worked in marketing and had a laugh that made you want to keep talking. We saw each other casually for a few weeks, No pressure, no promises. When she asked about my marriage, I gave her the short version. We wanted different things. She left. It ended. Lisa studied my face. That's not the whole story. No, I agreed. But it's the version I'm comfortable sharing right now. She respected that. We kept seeing each other. Life settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. Work during the week. Rock climbing on Saturdays with David and his crew. Dinners with my mother every other Sunday. Dates with Lisa when our schedules aligned. It wasn't the life I'd planned at 42. But it was a good life. Honest. Earned. Mine. The apartment stopped echoing. I filled it with books and plants and a sound system that played jazz while I cooked. I learned to make things besides pasta and sandwiches. I took pride in small accomplishments like a clean kitchen and a balanced budget. Then one evening, my mother called with news. I ran into Sarah's mom at the store, she said. Told me Sarah's engaged. I absorbed this information while stirring sauce on the stove. Engaged to who? Some guy she went to high school with. He moved back to Seattle after a divorce. They reconnected. My mother paused. She wanted me to tell you she's sorry again. That she hopes you're happy. I turned off the burner. What did you say? I told her you're doing great and to have a nice day. Then I bought my groceries and left. I smiled. Thanks, Mom. For what? For not giving her anything. She made her choices. You don't owe her updates on mine. My mother's voice softened. You really are okay, aren't you? Yeah, I said, surprised by how true it was. I really am. We talked about other things after that. Her book club. My work. The weather. Normal things that meant life had moved on. I told Lisa about it on our next date. She asked how I felt. I considered the question honestly. Indifferent, I said. I hope she's happy. I hope this guy is what she needs. But it doesn't affect me either way. Lisa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That's healthy. You've really let go. I squeezed back. I had to. Holding on was killing me. She smiled. I like you, Marcus Webb. I like you too, I said. And I meant it. Kevin asked me once what I'd learned from the whole experience. We were debugging a particularly nasty problem, and the conversation drifted personal. I leaned back in my chair. I learned that doing everything right doesn't guarantee the outcome you want. That sometimes people leave even when you're good to them. That betrayal says more about the betrayer than the betrayed. I paused. And I learned that surviving something doesn't make you weak. It makes you informed. He nodded slowly. That's heavy. It is, I agreed. But it's also freeing. When you stop thinking you failed and start understanding you were dealing with someone else's brokenness, the whole narrative changes. You're not the victim. You're the person who got out. Kevin went quiet for a moment. Thanks for sharing that. I returned to the code. Thanks for asking. Months passed. Seasons changed. I moved through my days with a steadiness that surprised me. There were still hard moments. Songs that reminded me of Sarah. Couples at restaurants who looked happy. Anniversaries my brain remembered even when I tried to forget. But those moments got shorter, less sharp, more like old bruises than fresh wounds. I was healing in the way you heal from serious injury. Slowly. Imperfectly. But undeniably. I ran into one of Sarah's friends at a coffee shop. She saw me, hesitated, then came over. Marcus, hi. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but I wanted you to know Sarah feels terrible about everything. I gave her a polite smile. I appreciate you telling me. She shifted uncomfortably. She really did care about you. I'm sure she did, I said. Just not enough. The friend didn't know how to respond to that. We made small talk for another minute, then parted ways. I didn't feel angry or vindicated. Just done. David threw a party for his birthday, and I went without anxiety about running into mutual friends or fielding questions about my personal life. I was just Marcus, the guy who brought good beer and stayed to help clean up. People asked what I was working on. I told them. They asked if I was seeing anyone. I mentioned Lisa casually. The conversations were normal, easy, unmarked by the weight of my divorce. I'd become a person again instead of a story. Late that night, after most people had left, David and I sat on his back porch with the last of the beer. "You've changed," he said. "Not bad different. Just different." I thought about that. I think I'm just more myself. Less trying to be what someone else needs. He clinked his bottle against mine. That's the dream, man. Being yourself and having that be enough. We sat in comfortable silence, and I realized he was right. I was enough. Not for Sarah. Not for Ethan's guilt. Not for anyone's narrative but my own. And that was exactly enough. I never heard from Ethan again. Mr. Cartwright confirmed he'd moved to Arizona, started over with some kind of consulting work, was reportedly sober and in therapy. Good for him, I thought without sarcasm. Genuinely. I hoped he got his life together. I hoped he learned from his mistakes. I just hoped all of that happened far away from me. His amends were his to make, and they didn't require my participation. Sarah got married 6 months later. I saw the announcement on social media through a friend's share. She looked happy in the photo. Her new husband looked kind. I felt nothing looking at it. No jealousy. No satisfaction. No ghost of what we'd been. Just the distant recognition that she was someone I used to know. I scrolled past and forgot about it by the next post. Lisa and I lasted another year before naturally running our course. We wanted different things long term. She wanted kids soon. I wanted to be sure. We parted as friends, and I meant it when I said she deserved someone who was all in. She hugged me and said I deserved that too. Maybe I did. Or maybe I'd learned that deserving has nothing to do with getting. You just build the best life you can with what you have and hope the right pieces find each other. I bought a house eventually. Small place in Sunnyvale with a yard and a garage I could convert into an office. My mother cried when I showed her around. "Your father would be so proud," she said. "I am too." I hugged her tight. "I couldn't have done this without you." She patted my back. "Yes, you could have. But I'm glad I got to help." Kevin came to the housewarming with his girlfriend and a plant he swore was easy to care for. David brought a toolbox and insisted on fixing things that weren't broken. Lisa sent a card with a sweet note. My life was full of people who'd stood by me, and I was grateful. One evening, I was sitting in my backyard, beer in hand, watching the sunset paint everything gold. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost didn't check it. But I did. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew. "This is Ethan. I know I said I wouldn't contact you again, but I'm writing my amends letter and my sponsor suggested I reach out. You don't have to respond. I just want you to know I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused. I hope you're well." I stared at that message for a full minute. Then I deleted it without responding. His amends were about his healing, not mine. I'd already forgiven him in the only way that mattered. By refusing to let him take up space in my head rent-free. I thought about that voicemail sometimes. The desperate one where he'd begged me to take Sarah back. How pathetic it had sounded. How vindicating. How ultimately meaningless. He'd wanted me to save him from his consequences. But consequences are the only teachers some people ever listen to. He'd needed to lose everything to start building something real. So had Sarah. So had I, in a way. We'd all gotten what we'd needed, even if none of us had wanted it. As the sun set completely and the sky deepened to purple, I raised my beer to the empty yard. To getting what you need instead of what you want, I said to no one. To surviving the thing that should have broken you. To becoming someone better on the other side. The words hung in the cooling air, then dissipated. I went inside to the house I owned, the life I'd built, the peace I'd earned. The story of Marcus and Sarah was over. The story of just Marcus was still being written. And I was finally okay with not knowing how it ended. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.